Good morning. ABARAT, Clive Barker. Chapter 16. The Universal Eye. Ugh, everything's still tangled from sleeping. Carrion had no love of things Comexian. On the island of Payan, where it was always 3 o'clock in the morning, Rojo Pixler had built Comexo City, his so-called City of Light and Laughter. It had been, many years before, the site of Carrion Night Mansion. The Lord of Midnight had happy memories of the times preceding the fire that destroyed the mansion, hours when Payan had a place to play. He needed no magic then. He'd been a prince, his father's favorite. That was all he had needed in order to make the world glorious and Payan a playground. But after the fire, he had never gone back. And when the man he thought was a harmless dreamer by the name of Rojo Pixler had offered to buy the land on which the ruins of the Midnight Mansion still stood, he readily sold it. Only later did he discover that Pixler's representatives had been serendipitously buying up other plots of land around Payan until he had enough ground to start the construction of his dream city, a place where night was to be permanently banished by a constant blaze of artificial light. What a mockery that on the very site where the Carrion family had lived in the palace of shadows and enigma was now a garish city whose every surface blazed. The dazzling god of it could be seen at midnight if you stood in certain spots along Marrowbone's shore on the northwest, where the wind off the Isabella thinned the red fogs. Carrion had promised himself that he would personally extinguish those lights when his night of nights came, and Rojo Pixler would get a nightmare or two to replace his bright and wretched dream. Something plucked from Carrion's own cortex. Something that would leave the man a gibbering wreck, driven so far into madness that he would be unable to even remember his name of his own damned city. But that was for the future. Until the happy night came, it made sense to put the inventions that Pixler funded to use. Pixler was no fool. He had found a way to marry the ancient magical principles that had been practiced on the island since the beginning of time with new machineries invented by the scientists he kept in gleaming laboratories in the towers of Comexo City. Where had Pixler found these first magical principles? In books he had paid professional thieves to steal from Carrion's own library, among other places. Carrion had let it be known that he was aware of the theft and even of the price Pixler had paid the thief, a fellow by the name of John Mischief, for his illicit services. Word had later reached him that Pixler, who was at heart a superstitious man, had become very agitated when he heard that his commission thefts were no secret. Fearing reprisal, he had casually offered the use of his sublime verities, as he called his marriage of science and magic, to Carrion, who should he never have needed them. Well, that time had come. Immediately following the interrogation of Shape, Carrion had sent one of his trusted lieutenants, Otto Houlihan, the crisscross man, to Comexo City. He was sent with a very specific demand. He knew that, for a fact, like any man of power, especially one who had risen suddenly like Pixler, the king of Comexo City was not only superstitious, but paranoid. He feared for his life and for his city, and with no reason. And no doubt there were people on every island who hated Comexo City and all that it represented. Being a practical man, a man who believed in finding solutions, not simply stewing in his fear, Pixler had instructed his magical scientists to use their sublime verities in the creation of spies that would take the shape of living things and would be dispersed through the islands to watch for and report of any sign of rebellion against him. Only a month before, the crisscross man had brought a dozen of these automaton spies to the 12th tower for the Lord of Midnight's amusement. They were like exquisite toys to Carrion's eye. He had amused himself by having Houlihan blindfold them, then watch them batter themselves to pieces against the walls of his scrying room. Some of the finest he had turned over to his own scientists for closer analysis. One, an artificial Meckel bird, he had caged and kept for himself because it needed no nourishment, and it sang fetchingly, even when blinded. Now he had a new reason for Rojo Pixler's spying operations. He wanted to know if the girl who had apparently been Mischief's accomplice had survived the waters of Isabella, and if so, where'd she'd gone. So he sent Houlihan to Comexo City for a short while, and a short while later the man returned. Not with information, but with one of Pixler's chief scientists, a certain Mr. Voerzangler. Jesus, Voerzangler. Voerzangler. The doctor appeared before Carrion dressed in a fine white linen suit, with white shoes and a white tie, and he wore one of the more peculiar ocular devices Carrion had ever seen. It had the effect of taking the image of his eyes and superimposing them, one over the other, in the middle of his face. Voerzangler's eyes were not a perfect match. One of them was a little bigger than the other, and one seemed to be a little slower in its motion than its companion. So the cycloptic eye the device created was seldom whole. One image was always trailing half an eye behind the other. Oh my God. Whatever the reason for his wearing it, the thing didn't seem to impair Voerzangler's vision. He was studying the paintings on the walls of the gallery when Carrion came in. His voice, when he spoke, was high-pitched and weaselly. "I hear," he said, "that you are searching for somebody." "Is that right? Somebody who has conspired against you, and you need Mr. Pixler's assistance?" Before Carrion could reply, the doctor continued, his voice, after a few sentences, already annoying Carrion. "Mr. Pixler instructed me to tell you that he is more than happy to help a friend and neighbor. Could you perhaps supply me with a brief description of the miscreant?" "No," said Carrion, "but I have somebody who can," and he turned to Houlihan. "Where's Shape?" "I brought him up from the kitchen as you instructed, sir. He's waiting in the next room." "Fetch him." While Houlihan went down to the length of the gallery to fetch Shape, Carrion turned his full attention on Voerzangler. "So what have you brought to impress me with?" he said. Voerzangler began to blink his 1.5 eyes vigorously. "It was Mr. Pixler's desire that you be given access to our most secret spying devices," he said. "The universal eye." "I am honored," Carrion replied. "May I ask why, if it is no secret, Mr. Pixler so honors me?" "He looks to the future, Lord Carrion. He sees a time when, if I may be so bold, you and he may be more than distant neighbors." "Ah," said Carrion. "Good. Then let me see what proof of his intentions he has sent." "Here," Voerzangler said, bringing Carrion's attention to the dark gray box, about 3 feet square, which was standing a little way down the gallery. He took a small control unit from his white jacket and touched it with his thumb. The response from the box was instantaneous. It rose into the air on a quintet of delicate legs, on which it had been squatting. Then, without any further instruction from Voerzangler, it began to open up like a geometric flower, so that it now presented 16 screens, 4 facing each wall of the room. An instant later, they all flickered into life, and the images were bright. Carrion smiled. "Well, well," he said. He started to move around the other side of the device, but as he did so, it accommodated him by flipping around, so as to present him with 4 more screens. Some of the images were static, but more were moving, their motions sometimes chaotic, as the camera, wherever it was situated, went in pursuit of the particular suspect. By now, Houlihan had brought Shape in. He was still wearing the same shabby coat, except that it was now decorated with the remains of his meal in the kitchens. He looked embarrassed when Carrion called him to hobble forward and view the multiplicity of screens. I'm hoping we're going to find our little Candy somewhere here, Carrion said to him. He turned to Verzanger. What kind of creatures do this spying for you? He asked. You saw some of them yourself, sir, a month ago. His cycloptic gaze became sly. I believe you still keep the Meckel bird in your private rooms. The meaning of this remark was not lost on Carrion. Verzanger was subtly telling him that even he, the Lord of Midnight, was spied upon. Carrion filed the information away for another time and simply pretended to not understand what he had been told. How many reports do you have in this device? He asked. 19,412, Verzanger replied. That's just from the last 2 days. Of course, if you want to go back further. No, said Carrion. 2 days is fine. Shape? Yes, Lord. Dr. Verzanger is going to show you a lot of pictures. If the girl is among them, I want to know. Otto, come and find me when you're ready. Carrion left him to it and went out into the midnight. His thoughts straying from Verzanger's sublime verities to subjects more massive and remote. It was the stars glimmering through the fog that were most present subject of his meditations. He knew from his books that each one of those distant lights was a sun unto itself, and though their meager illumination did not disturb him, there were other creatures in the ABARAT for which those little stars, not to mention the brightness of the noonday sun, or the light of the Pleiad moons that hung over the islands, were a curse. They were called the Requiacs. These creatures, and their home was in the deepest trenches of the Sea of Isabella. Their age and their capacity for evil were both beyond calculation. Such indeed was the scale of their wickedness and the extent of their age, that many learned men and women who'd made it their business to study the innumerable life forms of the ABARAT did not even believe they existed. Wickedness of such proportions was a mythic invention. They said the Requiacs could not be real. But Carrion had it from the trustworthy source that the Requiacs lived, and having that certain knowledge, he had wondered many times how things would be for his enemies across the archipelago if the light of the sun, moon, and stars were somehow to be blotted out for a little while. Whoa, that almost could have been tragic. Baby. In that time would the Requiacs not rise up from their unfathomable trenches, forsaking the temples where they still paid homage by the blind monsters of the deep, and turn their vast, depraved faces toward the lightless sky? Rise up and come where they had not ventured since the time when the great clouds of ash had covered the sun, moon, and stars. What harm would they do if they walked the islands again? What cities would they bring down? What peoples would they erase? It was beyond even Carrion's power to fully conceive of the devastation they would unleash. But he knew one thing. He wanted to be there to witness it, and he wanted to be ready when the hour of darkness passed and the Requiacs returned to their temples and their trenches, ready with his masons and his priests to lay down the foundation of a new world and rebuild it in his image. Lord? The voice that had disturbed his thoughts was not that of Houlihan, as he had expected. It was one of his grandmother's many stitchlings, creatures sewn together from skin and leather and fabric, then filled with living mud. This particular stitchling was called Notcheck, and he was a wretched piece of work in every way. What is it? Carrion said to him. Your grandmother, Mater Motley, summons you, my lord. She needs to talk to you about the visitation you had from Comexo City. She misses nothing, does she? Carrion remarked. Little, my lord, Notcheck agreed. Well, I cannot come now, Carrion said to the stitchling. I have too much urgent business. She told me, Notcheck was getting nervous. Plainly, this was not a message he wished to deliver. Go on, Carrion said. Oy vey. Here, let's just go back. Notcheck was getting nervous. Plainly, this was not a message he'd wished to deliver. Go on, Carrion said. She says she forbids any further presence of Gorgrosium of visitors from Comexo. She forbids, Carrion said. There was a menacing undertow to his voice. The nightmares in the water around his head grew agitated. She forbids me. That harridan, that seamstress. He caught Notcheck with one backward sweep of his gloved hand, so powerful it threw the stitchling 10 yards. Go back to her, Carrion shouted, and you tell her if she ever forbids me of anything ever again, I will lose a pack of nightmares among her littlest tribe of stitchlings and drive them to tear down the 13th tower, till there is nothing left but a heap of rubble. Do I make myself clear? I think this might be a stitchling, but who knows? I could be deadly wrong. As he spoke, he moved towards Notcheck, as though to strike him again. The stitchling drew itself up into a little ball of terror and waited to be brutalized. But the blow never fell. Houlihan had emerged from the gallery smiling. She's found, he exclaimed. Carrion waved Notcheck away. Go, tell her, he said. Notcheck fled into the crimson mist and was gone. A problem, sir? Houlihan said. Only my grandmother. She has too many fancy ideas about herself. One of these days she's going to go too far. So, you say you found her? Show me. Houlihan led Carrion back inside. The same image was now playing on all 16 screens of Rusanger's device. The white-suited Cyclops had a smug smile on his face. She was in the Yabadem Day, in a house down on Crux Street, which is in the fisherman's ghetto. I must say, my lord, I can't see why you would have any interest in her. She doesn't look like much. I'll be the judge of that, Carrion said. He approached the screens. The images before him were crystal clear. There was the girl, staring straight at the eyes of the spy, which moved to keep her centered and focused whenever she turned or backed away. Carrion turned to Mendelssohn's Shape. Are you absolutely sure this is a girl who was with mischief? Shape nodded. No doubt. No, Lord, none. Carrion returned his gaze to the screen. So, he said quietly, staring at the girl, who are you? He continued to stare at the image for several seconds, as though his eyes were attempting to interrogate the screen. Then he glanced around to Rusanger. When did this happen? 3 hours ago, maybe 4. So she's probably still in the Yabadim Day? What did you think, Otto? There have been some troubles there, Rusanger said before Houlihan had a chance to respond. The dock collapsed, so there have been no boats getting out these last couple of hours. So she is still there, Houlihan said. What's the big deal, Rusanger said. She's just... Carrion suddenly raised a finger to silence the doctor and stared with renowned intensity at the image on the screens. The stranger from the hereafter had become angry, and her face, recorded by the very thing that was irritating her, had changed. The girlishness had gone out of it. A young woman had been ignited by the fury she had felt. The change had Carrion entranced. Now what is this? He said, so softly. His narrowed eyes taking off his gloves and putting his naked hand on the screens as if wishing he could reach into it and seize hold of the girl herself. Do I know you? He said, his voice even more malicious. I do, don't I? The screen suddenly went blank. Carrion let out a little sob of pain, as though he'd been woken from a trance. It ends there, Rusanger said. Carrion didn't speak for a long while. He simply continued to stare at the blank screen with an expression of profound bemusement on his face. Rusanger opened his mouth to speak again, but Houlihan hushed him with a sharp look. Finally, after 2 minutes, Carrion said, Shape? Yes, Lord. Go to Vesper's Rock and wait for me there. Am I to go after the girl? Oh, yes, you are to go after her, but not by Cliff. I'm going to give you something a little more in keeping with the significance of your mission. I don't understand. Just go, Carrion said, still staring at the blank screen. Shape hurried away. There's something on that face, Otto, that makes me think my enemies are wilier than I suspected. They play with dreams now. Dreams? Asked Crisscross Man. Yes, Otto. I have dreamed that face, that innocent face, but who? He glanced up and met Vruzanger's strange stare. Oh, are you still here? He said to the doctor. You may go. Thank you, Mr. Pixler, for his kindness. Will you? The Universal Eye, Vruzanger said. I have to return it to Comexo City with it. No, said Carrion very plainly. I'll keep it here for now. No, no, no. You don't understand, Vruzanger said, panic making his words skip. The science is of no interest to me, Vruzanger, so don't fret yourself. I won't be stealing back any of your precious Verdals. It's her I'm interested in, and until I have the real thing in front of me, I will keep your Universal Eye. It's just not. The doctor didn't get to finish his reply. Carrion was on him in a heartbeat, his hands at the man's throat. Vruzanger tried to drag Carrion's huge grasp away from his windpipe, but his own thin little fingers weren't equal to the job. Carrion lifted him off the floor. His feet were dangling in the air. You were saying, Doctor, Carrion said. The life was rapidly going out of Dr. Vruzanger. His conjoined eyes were becoming glassy. His limbs were jangling as though he was having a fit. We might need Mr. Pixler's help in the future, Houlihan remarked casually. Carrion chewed on this for a moment. Then he took his hands off Vruzanger. The man dropped to a gasping, sobbing heap at the Lord of Midnight's feet. Take him outside. Houlihan hauled the doctor up and dragged him toward the door, pausing only to plug the controls to the Universal Eye out of Vruzanger's pocket. Once he deposited them outside of the gallery door, he returned to await Carrion's next instruction. When it came, it was simple enough. Show me the girl again, Carrion said, and then you can go. Vruzanger's device was easy to work. The image of the girl from the hereafter was soon called upon up onto the screen again, readily to be replayed and replayed. Arrange a glyph to take me to Vesper's Rock, Carrion said as he stared at the images of Candy. I want 5 corpses there, waiting for me. The usual place. Get some off the gallows, but they have to be old. I'm going to need dust. He stared at the screens. Dust for the girl from the hereafter. He smiled to himself. It's the least I can do. And that ends chapter 16. Whoop whoop, have a good day.